That is a great greeting. Jack, thank you so much for that introduction. Kathy, thank you so much for also inviting me to be here. I'm excited to see all of you. I'm not usually up at this hour in the morning because I do the 5, 6, and 11, but y'all are special. So that's why we're all here. And I get to introduce and really lead an informative conversation here that will hopefully motivate all of you to think differently and to do something differently when you leave here today. I always say when you're in a space, you want to leave people better and more informed than you found them. So that is our goal today. And we do that by inviting our esteemed panelists to join us this morning. So first, I'd like to welcome Sharon Kershbaum, who is the Interim Director of Transportation for the District Department of Transportation, to come up and join us here. Come on up. I'd also like to welcome Sheppard Miller, the Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth of Virginia. He had the longest commute. And finally, we round out this dynamic panel with Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Transportation for the Maryland Department of Transportation. And of course, we're here to discuss with all of you this whole idea of moving from place to place. And in my business, the business of communication, I talk about the business of truth and humanity. And your business is about moving people from place to place, right? But that is obviously a very layered thing, moving people from place to place. And we've heard terms today about vibrancy and economic growth and long-term stability. And when I hear those things, I always think about people who have to provide for their families, children who may be moving around parts of our region for the first time to places they've never seen because they have the opportunity to move around through metro or through transportation. And so I want to help us frame our conversation with people and personhood at the center, because when I hear a lot about what's happening with our region, when we hear about what General Manager Randy Clark just laid out about the future of WMATA, I'm deeply concerned about people who live on the margins and who are underserved, and how these challenges will impact them even more greatly. And so we can't have a conversation about emerging from this pandemic in an equitable way without talking about how transportation impacts not just those of us who have the most, but those who have the least. So shall we talk? We've got 30 minutes to do this so that we can make sure you know something, you feel something, and you act differently based on what you hear today. So why don't we start our conversation with each of you telling us a little bit about yourself, about your administration's vision for transportation, how you're working toward that vision as an agency, and maybe talk a little bit about progress or areas that maybe we're still falling short. And we'll start with you,
Terrific.
Interim Director
Thanks,
Kershbaum.
Leslie. Hi, good morning, Sharon Kershbaum. I am now in my, 2 months as Interim Director. I've been at DDOT as the Deputy Director for 2 years. So I think I'm probably the newbie. And I'll be honest, I'm also relatively new to the transportation industry. My background has been in local government, in federal government, both in DC and other cities, and I've done stints in the private sector as well. I think my area of focus has been budget, procurement, navigating the bureaucratic areas that make it hard to get things done in government. And I'll tell you, my last role in local government here in DC was at the Department of Human Services. And while there, I think I really became sensitized to what it feels like to transact business with the government. At DHS, we provide eligibility determination services for SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid. And while we feel like we're giving people help, that help doesn't always feel like help when it requires multiple stays, waiting in line, having to come back again, having to get the right documentation. So figuring out how to simplify things. What does that business process feel like, whether it's for a TANF recipient or for someone who's in line for a permit? That's really been a lot of my orientation to government, and just keep it easier for people. Vis-a-vis our big vision. So we have the unambitious 25-year transportation plan that is founded on 7 priorities. So I'm going to run through those because I think it is something that we need to continue to move across all components. That involves safety. Safety is probably our North Star. Equity, mobility, infrastructure project delivery, maintenance and operations, enjoyable spaces, and sustainability. And I wish I could say we can go all in on any one of those 7, but we really need to keep all 7 in mind. We have done an incredible job, I think, building the infrastructure so that we can have 25% of DC residents live without a car, and they can get to where they need to work, where they need to live, shop, go to religious services, whatever they need. And that's possible. And that is very much because of the infrastructure we've built vis-a-vis bike lanes. Priority bus lanes is our new focus right now, which I'll talk to later. And we have sidewalks that are safe. We have enjoyable spaces. The thing that I am going to just own a little bit, and the question of sort of where are we coming up short has got to be in the safety area. Safety for us means slowing things down. So I know we had a lot of conversations about congestion, which slows things down, but that is something that we embrace because slow drivers are not resulting in traffic fatalities. In terms of Vision Zero, we are at 45 fatalities this year. That is record high over the past few years. And it is so frustrating. We invest so much in traffic safety interventions. We have an engineering toolkit to help make intersections safer. And we have been doing a really expansive job in that space. The other safety toolkit we have is automated traffic enforcement. We are introducing 470 cameras, whether it's speed cameras, red light cameras, stop sign cameras, to again, get people to slow down and to comply with traffic laws. And we have, in addition to enforcement, education. And we are relaunching some education efforts to change behavior. But at the end of the day, we are seeing that these traffic fatalities are often being caused by reckless and distracted drivers, and we don't have a good toolkit for that. We can tell this because a lot of the fatalities are involving the occupant in the vehicles, and that's really a sign of really driving at incredibly high speeds. So we're coming up short with that goal. We are far from zero, and we're really struggling with how to target that subset of incredibly dangerous drivers where the perfectly engineered intersection and ample traffic enforcement is not going to stop them.
Secretary Miller, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you had the longest commute of all of us here today, and tell us a bit more
Just a hop,
about
skip, and a jump.
just a hop, skip, and a jump.
Leslie, thank you. And let me thank the Board of Trade and the Washington Partnership, Jack and Kathy, and particularly Georgetown for letting us be here. David, I think who's gone on to get back to work perhaps. What a great places. What a beautiful facility, and one of the premier institutions of higher learning in the country and in the world, actually. So it's just great to be here. I was in the Amazon headquarters yesterday, the new Amazon headquarters, which is stunning. This place is equal. This is a great facility here. So glad to be here. Leslie, unlike most of the folks involved in this work, I'm not a transportation professional. I'm not a government professional, if you will. I worked in government the first time in 1980 for 3 months when I was in the Senate of Virginia working as an aide. And I haven't worked in government since until 2 years ago. So I'm back. I'm a business guy from Hampton Roads. Have spent my whole life there, and I was a defense contractor. Sold my business and retired, I thought. But I've been on the transportation board for 8 years on and off, and the governor asked me to come up, so that's why I'm here. And excited to be here. It's a great time to be in transportation. It's a great time to serve the Commonwealth, and I got a fantastic boss, and so we're really excited to be here. In Virginia, my governor likes to say, Governor Youngkin likes to say, Virginia needs to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And that's really what it's all about. And transportation is a critical piece of that. As you know, our vision in Virginia is to have the very best transportation system in the world. Not just the safest, not just the most efficient, not just the most cost-effective, but all the above of that. And we're working really hard to do that. And thankfully, because of many people that came before me, we have the 3rd largest highway system in the country. And we're ranked the best highway system in the country by the Reason Foundation this year for cost effectiveness and performance. So that's not really my doing. As you know, you inherit these things and you sort of hold on and try to set your own piece for the next administration. But a lot of people worked hard to get there, and we're certainly part of that. And transportation in Virginia, you know, transportation is diverse in Virginia. In my job, I'm the secretary. I don't run the department. That's an agency. But I have everything from VDOT and to space. So we're launching missiles out of Wallops Island, or rockets out of Wallops Island, I should say, to the space station.
I was
missiles,
gonna, I thank you for
rockets,
being ever so clear about
rockets,
that.
Rockets, not missiles.
Because we might have to have a side
Rockets
conversation
out of-
if there
out
was
of-
something else going on.
Rockets out of Wallops Island, which is on a huge growth curve, by the way. Very exciting. We've got DMV. You know, DMV was sort of a mess in Virginia, frankly. And through just pure management, Randy, pure management, no money, no systems, no new stuff. We took the average wait times when you go to the DMV across the Commonwealth from 38 minutes pre-COVID to 8 and 9 minutes today. So people going in there are saving 25 minutes on average. Millions and millions of people that visit the DMV. So it's just a huge savings. And we did that just by getting the employees to focus on what was important, helping them to understand this has all been employee driven from the bottom up, grassroots. We pointed at stuff and said, how do we make this better? And we formed teams, and it's just been fantastic. So we've got that. We're working hard on our Smart Scale process. Smart Scale is our award-winning and innovative process where we rank and score transportation projects in Virginia to determine which ones bring us the most bang for the bucks. And we've been doing that for about 8-10 years now. We're in the process of tweaking that a little bit to make it even better than it is. So we're excited about that. And then we just want to make sure that we maintain the assets that we have. And that's part of what the Reason Foundation talked about. And Sharon talked about safety, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but she's right. Safety is a huge problem. Virginia much bigger, of course, in footprint. We lost over 1,000 people last year. 1,000 people. And I say this all the time. Imagine if we had 3 airplanes crash in Virginia every year with 333 people on it. Every year, year in, year out, they crashed. Everybody died. What would we do? It would be very different than what we do here. And the problem here is we've gotten used to it. And it's 1 here and 2 there and 1 here and 3 there. And you just read it every day in the newspaper. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I see them all. You know, I get texts every day. Yesterday, we had somebody killed walking across the train track. Young boy. Terrible, terrible. So we're really focused on that, and we've convened a group in the state government between transportation, public safety, to really focus on this. And how do we get that down? And frankly, to Sharon's point, we're not going to engineer this out. Engineering is not the problem. It's a part of the problem. It's a small part of the problem, frankly. It's driver behavior, right? And the only way to engineer that out is educate and enforce. Right? You just can't keep somebody, you can't engineer somebody from walking across the street at night and dark drunk. I don't know how to fix that, right? I can't fix that in an engineering way, not in a practical way. So we've got to do better. And my goal is to bend that curve. And as I said, you know, we got 1,000. Thankfully, we're down this year so far, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We're down a little bit, but if we could bend that curve 15%, everybody who is in here now wouldn't be dead, and otherwise you would be. Think about that. Think about the impact of that. If we can do that as transportation leaders, and I could save 150 people every year in Virginia, or 300 or 400, year after year after year, imagine the impact. And so that's what we want. That's what we're about.
Secretary Wiedefeld, you've spent time both in Maryland and in D.C. and in Virginia, and you are not a stranger to most people here in the room, or me. But tell us a bit more about your priorities now, where you are.
If I could, let me just start off picking up where the secretary just ended. I often get asked, you know, what keeps you up at night? And the only thing that keeps me up at night is just those issues. Someone dying on our system, either one of my employees, one of our contractors, or one of our users, whether it's on a facility or one of our services. It's what kept me up at Metro. It was what drove a lot of the decisions there was how do we not have that happen under our watch? And it's something, that you and I, like you say, every day I'm getting dinged on, an incident somewhere across the state. And it's what eats at us all, I think, in this profession, that we can't do more about it. And it's the challenge that we face to try to get there. So just hate to start off on that, but it is such a serious issue for us. And unfortunately, we're headed the wrong way. We had almost 550 fatalities last year, of which almost a third were the most vulnerable users, pedestrian, bicyclists. And then this year we're aiming towards almost 600 fatalities. So those are souls, those are family members. Yeah. Right. So we have to do everything that we can to continue to focus on that. In terms of overall arching vision for the department and really for the state of Maryland, if you've heard our governor speak, it is, our North Star is leave no one behind. And what that means for a department like ours, and so we run, transit, the airport, the port, highways, DMV, and we've also hit very low numbers, thank you. And the toll authority.
Come on.
That's right.
Let's compete.
That's right. That's good. So anyway, we run all this, but when we think about it now, historically, DOT thinks of moving people or goods from A to B. Right? That's where we spend a lot of our energy, a lot of our thinking. And yes, we do that, but that is not what our vision is. Our vision is how do we bring people that have not had been part of the success of our state? And what role can transportation play in doing that? And not only what role does transportation play, but how do we interact with other parts of state government to make that happen? So whether it's working with the Department of Labor to create a workforce, initiatives, whether it's working with the Department of Corrections to basically get people that are coming out of that system and giving them the opportunity to get back into the economy, whether it's working with our Department of Environment to make sure what we do does not obviously take us backwards. But most importantly, how do we support social equity, right? Sustainability of our communities and protect the environment. And the way that we're approaching this is we have to think of how do we, particularly on the surface transportation side, how do we get people either out of their cars or get more people in their cars, right? And to think of that. So everything that we look at now, whether it's in how we plan, how we design, how we build, and how we operate our system, comes with that lens. And to be frank, that's, I've been in this business almost 40 years. I've been in different modes. But and I did not know the secretary. I did not know the governor until I met him during an interview. And that's what brought me into this, to be frank, because that is the vision of the governor. And it's something that he's passionate about. It's something that obviously feeds a passion in me. So that is where we're going to take the state. Very tough choices have to be made to achieve that. But I'll go back to the core issue, which is, will always be the safety of the individuals that use our system in any way.
You talked about tough choices. Obviously, we heard WMATA General Manager Randy Clark lay out for all of us, and he has done this for some time, what has been called the death spiral of Metro, right? And we know how essential Metro is to all of the region and to all of the priorities and to families and to companies and to businesses. But if I could be his transportation translator here, I think what he's saying to all of you is, show me the money. How are we going to keep this integral system that impacts everyone in this region? How are we going to ensure the health of it? How are we going to ensure the safety of it? And how are we going to ensure the funding of it? And each of your jurisdictions has skin in the game. So Secretary Wiedefeld, I said to you, do you have muscle memory from this? Because you've been down this road. You've had to make the case that the general manager has made about the challenging times during your many years of service. Why don't you start us out by talking about what Maryland is going to do to help WMATA regain its footing?
First and foremost, the importance of that system to obviously to Maryland, but to the region is really, it cannot be overstated, because it is what basically makes us competitive both nationally and and internationally, right? And everything we do. So we cannot let it obviously fail. But we also have to deal with financial realities, right? So I have also a system in Baltimore that's under the exact same stress that we have to, meet commitments there. We run, 6 modes, and they're under stress, as was mentioned earlier. We have a multi-billion-dollar hole in our capital program. So we have to put that in context with the other pressures we're under. Does not mean we're not going to obviously meet what it takes to continue to support the system, build the system for the future, improve the system. But like any household budget, you have to do it within a budget. And so we'll have to make some hard decisions. I know that the agency is, and we'll do that. One thing I did want to mention, though, with my experience at Metro, and we lose sight of this sometimes because we get hung up with the numbers and all the different things, is the workforce, the frontline workforce, and the tremendous job they do. And I don't think it's fair to move that it's their part of the problem. And I hear that, occasionally, and I don't think that's right, having worked there. These are men and women that are very committed, to their customers and to the agency. So I don't think we're going to solve it by just saying, okay, we deal with that issue, we solve it. Having sat through lots of negotiations, I think we'll all have to come to the table for sure to deal with this issue. But I don't think there's a silver bullet out there. I think it's going to be a continued discussion. We'll have to make some hard choices along the way. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of us are going to back away from the importance of that system to this region.
Secretary Miller?
Leslie, I agree with the Secretary when he starts off to say, well, WMATA is incredibly important. Metro is incredibly important to Northern Virginia and obviously to the region and to the Commonwealth. So we'll start with that. We understand how important it is. The second thing I'll say is, we're excited about what Randy's doing. It's hard work. Paul knows the challenges there, but we have a lot of confidence in Randy, and we think he's making some good decisions and leading his group in the right way. So I'll start with that. Having said that, WMATA's got some intractable structural long-term problems. Jack sort of mentioned some of that earlier. The pandemic made it much, much worse. But over the last 10 years, pre-pandemic, the ridership's been going down, down, down. It's down 17% from 2010, right? We're expanding the system, we're increasing service, and less people are riding for 10 years, for 9 years. So what's all that about, right? What's going on there? So we got that situation, and obviously, at the same time, if you look at fares have remained relatively flat over that period of time. So people are paying less, with less people paying, there's more service, and what do we end up with? What we end up with. We end up with a big hole, right? So that's where we are, and at the end of the day, you got a supply and a demand problem. We have some more supply today than we have demand. And, I'm a business guy, right? I can't go to a government and say, give me money. I could only go to my customer. That's the only place I could go, or to somebody to loan me some money, right? That's the only place I have to go. I have to meet the need at the end of the day to pay the bill. And WMATA is no different, right? The government is not a blank check. Our citizens they're under stress as well, right? They're suffering the same inflation pressures that everybody else is suffering. And so it's tough stuff. And the question that we have, or that I have, the administration has, is how can we get WMATA to really be the best it can be? How do we right size this thing? How do we get it so that it does what it needs to do, but we don't spend more money than we need to get there? And frankly, I think we are right now. That's what we're doing. It's not an easy situation. Paul knows it. Randy knows it. But our admin and facilities costs are really high at WMATA. I mean, they just are. And comparing to the other systems, and they're high. And there's some vagaries in the data and so forth, but you lump it all together, you just look at it, and our costs are high at WMATA. They just are. And our service, we've got a service level this year that's the highest we've ever had. Highest service level we ever had. And yet our ridership is way down. So you can't keep chasing that. It costs too much money to chase it. And the question is, how often does the service need to be viable to bring people to the system? How often does that have to be? I got on at the station, the news station, out in Crystal West, Capitol Landing, a few weeks ago. And, a beautiful place. It's really gonna be great for that region, for that area. And I looked at the fare to Boston. It was the last, stop on that line. And it was about $5, right? And it was running really fairly regularly, every few minutes, 6, 7, 8 minutes, whatever it was. It was pretty regular. It was good. And I just picked up my phone and called Uber. What does it cost me to get to Uber? Called Uber to go to Boston. And it was like $28 in tolls, right? And how many minutes it was. And so that was the option I had, right? And I should have called Lyft. That's what I should have done. So I did. But in any case, the point is, those were my options, sort of, right? And like, it should have been $7 instead of $5. Should it run, 30% less? I don't know the specific answer, but I can tell you that you can't just keep chasing that. The other thing I would tell you is that the fares are flat. There still is tremendous fare evasion. And listen, I just don't know why we accept that. And now obviously WMATA's fighting back on that, but go pull the data. It's on the website. Go pull the data and look at the fare evasion by station. You got stations at 50, 60% fare evasion. 15, 60% of the people that get on don't pay, right? That's a problem. If 50, 60% of my customers in business didn't pay, I'd be out of business, right? Now, Randy showed us the slides. We know that fares aren't everything, and there's subsidies in here, but everybody's got to do their part. So I'm looking for WMATA to come forward to us and see it and show us some real hard choices. And some of that's going to be people, some of that's going to be service, some of that's going to be fares, but it's got to all work together. And at the end of the day, you don't want to kill the system. You don't want to put it in that death spiral. Nobody wants that. What Randy showed us is true, and it's important. And so I think we just got to get serious, and we just can't afford what we can't afford, but we still got to deliver what we need to do the things.
Well, I would say WMATA would certainly say they're doing their part around fare evasion. There's been a lot of procedures put into places and certain stations where there have been problems with fare evasion, which have also been controversial too, right? Some people say, well, wait, why should we do all of this stuff? It may be harsh. Obviously, there are other people who say, wait, we can't lose all this money. So it seems to be a straddled line that everybody is having to walk here on that. And certainly Randy Clark can talk more about that. And if there are questions about that, maybe we can get to that at the end.
Leslie, let me just say this. So you brought it up. I just can't go there. I mean, I don't know. I can't grasp the concept that fare evasion is okay. I just can't grasp that. That's coming into my store, picking up a loaf of bread and walking out the door without paying for it. I don't know why that's okay. I just not. If you need bread, I get it, but like I need it too. And so it's just, I'm not talking a little bit. I'm talking 50 and 60% in these stations. Unfortunately, and this is not a bash or WMATA thing, but facts are facts. The last board meeting, we looked at the buses, right? 28.5 million bus trips in last quarter. 8 million were paid. 8 million out of 28 were paid. 20 million riders didn't pay. They fare evaded, or the system didn't work. What do you do with that?
Well,
you got to fix that problem. So listen, nobody wants WMATA to succeed more than the people sitting up here. Everybody understands how important it is. But we've got to, and it's not a for-profit business, as Randy said. Nobody's looking for a profit here. We're just trying to balance the books, and we've got to balance supply and demand. We've got to do that. We have to find a way to do that.
Director.
Sure.
Kershbaum.
Just to add and acknowledge, yes. So WMATA's survival is the district survival. We're all in, and we know that there's some incredibly hard choices ahead for everyone, and we appreciate that Randy's leadership is here to help shepherd through this really challenging time. I do want to add something to the supply and demand concern. And one of the things that as the district is really trying to help support is to drive demand, because that is a lever that we have. So priority bus lanes has been key to that. If people are sitting in a car and they see the bus zipping past them, that actually now becomes a viable commuting option for them. If they see the buses stopping and delayed, then suddenly that's not going to be a choice to get out of the car. We built 12 miles of priority bus lane. We're halfway to our goal. By 2025, we want to have 25 either built or constructed. And those are game changers. It's not just the red paint. It's, queue jumps. It's having, the buses don't need to pull over because we've got bulb outs for loading and unloading. And now with our clear lane traffic enforcement, we can improve efficiency of buses by 15 to 20%. So that makes it an option that people may not have had before, or have considered before. And even helping bridge that last mile. If people are getting off the metro and think it's still a 15-block walk, but we have scooters and bike share readily available with bike infrastructure that makes them feel safe doing it, then suddenly the metro becomes an option. So we need to go all in to help improve that demand so that people are getting out of their cars. Because again, we are nowhere near where we were pre-COVID, and we need to, as Randy showed, we need to go back not only to where we were before, but really drive ridership even well beyond that. So
I'm going to move us through these next questions individually for all of you so that we can get them answered. And hopefully if you all have questions, we'll get to that. So forgive me if I'm moving this a little more rapid fire. Secretary Wiedefeld, let's talk about what's happening with the Moore-Miller administration. Back in August, the department announced a new path forward to address congestion mobility issues on 495, on I-270, the American Legion Bridge. Can you talk a little bit more about this vision and where that currently stands?
Sure. The governor's committed, obviously, to try to take on some of these issues head on, but in a different approach. That, as you know, that project had a history where it was moving in a certain direction. That changed, the business model changed with the partner that we had in that. So, our goal is to basically work with the community and develop something in that corridor that basically meets the community needs. It's going to be much more multimodal focus in terms of getting at the issue of how to make transit move quicker across the bridge. We have a bridge that needs to be replaced. We all know that. How do we introduce transit-oriented development along that corridor, for instance? How do we use the Brunswick line along that corridor? How do we get people, again, to maybe share rides in that corridor? So that's what we want to do, is work with community. We've held a number of meetings. We have one in Rockville, I believe, this Saturday. We'll do another series right after the new year. Again, to work with the community and say, what is it that you need, right? The southern portion is a little clearer because of the bridge and its element. The northern portion, north of the ICC, I-270, which is its own separate issue. In some ways, it's connected, but yet it's its own separate issue. Total rethinking of that, and again, with the community. So that's where we are. It's just sort of starting that process in some ways new again, but at a much more community-based approach towards it versus us coming in and saying, no, here's the answer, and we're ready to go.
Secretary Miller, we've talked about Virginia. You've adopted this public-private partnership model to try to solve some of the big issues around congestion throughout the Commonwealth. I wonder what's made this model successful for Virginia, and are there some other sort of unique opportunities that you're using or considering for transportation and your infrastructure needs?
Great question, Leslie. And most of this work came way before I got here, although I've been on the board and watching it. Virginia's a leader in P3s, as you know, and we've had some great ones and we've had some that aren't so great. I think the one thing that tops the list is you really got to know what you're trying to get here. We're about choice in Virginia. So our P3s are not about, generally are not about you either use it or you don't go. We have that down in the Hampton Roads region in one particular area, and it's a difficult situation. We didn't have a lot of competition, so competition is extremely important in P3s, right? So you got to get a handle on your costs. You got to have good competition. You got to know what you're really trying to do, and you got to have some choice there. And we've had some steps that we do that went great early on, but in general, we've done a great job, and we're continuing to look at more opportunities. At the end of the day, you're going in business with a private partner, right? And they're gonna run it, and they're gonna try to do it efficiently. And so you got to make sure your deal's right. You got to make sure the public gets what the public gets. The great thing about P3s and choice though, and I'm a little bit late to the game on this. I'm not a huge fan of tolls, frankly. And we could have a long session on that and we could go through all that, but we won't do that here today. But at the end of the day, when the private sector offers an alternative, offers a choice, and you don't have to do it if you don't want to. If you take it, the people that don't do it are helped, and you're helped, and you decide to do it. It's just like, do you want a nicer dinner or do you want a lesser dinner? And people have a choice, and it makes a huge difference. And so we've been successful in Virginia doing that. We'll continue to look at opportunities to do that. We're looking at them right now for additional opportunities there, and we'll continue to chase that until it doesn't make sense to do so. But it's really been good for Virginia, and we'll continue to make sure it is.
Director Kershbaum, we know DC has several major long-term projects, programs in the works. So how are you thinking about these projects and programs as part of the larger regional transportation system? And how is that going to be key for helping with this vision for better mobility across the region?
Sure. I think I need to manage expectations a little bit in terms of the scope of our infrastructure projects. I know when the bill money came out, people had big ideas and they were really excited, and those numbers seemed big. And an earlier speaker talked about the fact that our construction costs have been going up so dramatically that much of those new dollars are actually helping us pay for those projects that are already in the queue. And our first and foremost priority has got to be really the sort of restoring our bridges. We have 3 bridges that are in poor condition, so that's got to be at the head of the queue. Teddy Roosevelt, H Street Bridge by Union Station, and our Benning Road Bridge. So those are really quickly coming out, and we're starting solicitations this year on those. 395 HOV Bridge Lane. These are not exciting, fun, new things. These are getting the bridges in the condition they need to be, but we've got to, with limited resources, focus on sort of the fundamentals. And we have some really fun things too. We're still working on a deck over in DuPont Circle to make it really an open space that can be used for public enjoyment and not just for commuting and traffic. And then our 11th Street Bridge project, which is something very close to my heart. We've used the abandoned piers when we redid the 11th Street Bridge, and we're going to have a park that's going to connect Anacostia to the Navy Yard. It's going to be state-of-the-art and iconic, and that's also moving quickly. So we have really exciting projects, but our list is not growing. We're really now using the resources that we have, which are incredibly constrained, to get done the fundamentals and where we can sprinkle in some of the fun stuff.
This is really interesting stuff to hear, all these projects that are coming together, because as you move across DC, Virginia, and Maryland, and you see all of these things happening, you wonder, okay, when is this going to be done, and what's next, and what's happening? And you talked about bridges, which are also so very important to the District of Columbia. When we have those issues where pedestrian bridges have been hit and things have come down, that has literally cut people off from other parts of the city. So when people ask about bridges and why they're so important, they are building bridges for people to go places, to get to these important services and things that they need. And it's important to remind people of that. To close us out, I wonder if each of you could share one key priority, I should say, whether it's transportation related or transportation adjacent, whether it's about land use or funding, that is going to be essential, you all think, to realizing what your administration's visions are for not just your jurisdiction, but for the entire region. And would you like to start us off, Secretary Wiedefeld?
Actually, I have to go back to the safety issue.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're stealing my thunder.
yeah. Oh, I mean, it is like I talked about before. So some things we're doing there is looking at our complete streets program, for instance, hasn't looked at in over a decade. And what can we do to make sure that we're keeping people safe? Yes, there's going to be the incidents of the person in the middle of the night and doing whatever they're doing, but there's many other incidents where it's things that maybe we can do differently, or incorporate the ability to even walk at the beginning of some of these projects where we provide the facilities. You saw the graphic earlier that the professor showed that yes, you can do this, but it's an investment, it's choices, as the secretary's mentioned before. So that is something I think it's this region, I have 24 counties, that is an important issue across the state of Maryland, everywhere I go. That is really the number one issue I generally always hear about.
It's really interesting that all of you are centering on this, because I know as a journalist, it seems to us that we are covering far more of these tragedies. I think last week in Riverdale Park with the 2 young children crossing the street with a father, just trying to get to school, and they are hit and killed. And you can't even imagine what their families are grappling with now. So to hear all of you say that this is on your radar in a different way tells us that there is something that we have to do behaviorally as well, right?
100%.
Whether we're walking or whether we're biking or whether we're behind the wheel, we all have to be part of the solution here. Secretary Miller.
Let me double down on that, Leslie, because it's just, as we've pushed and pushed and pushed to get bike ped in, right? We've done more of that, and for good reason, good stuff, right? I don't know how many of you all have had this experience, but I got hit by a car on a bike, broadside, T-boned, and I flew. It's the only time I've ever flown, for real. And it was great till I came down, and then it wasn't so great. So I know what it's like. Now, thankfully, I wasn't seriously injured. I was beat up a little bit and I hurt for a long time, but nothing beyond that. The point is we introduce more bike ped. If you hit a car at 20 miles an hour, 2 cars hit, generally people don't die. You hit a bicyclist at 20 miles an hour, or pedestrian with a car, not a good outcome. And as we put more people in there, you talked about Amsterdam earlier, somebody talked about Amsterdam. I love that city, by the way. But as you put more people and you don't do it the right way, you're just creating the problem, right? And I'll give you an example. So I live in Richmond during the week, and I'm on my commute to work is a one-way road, and I get to a stoplight where I need to make a left onto another one-way road. And I can do that in Virginia, right? I signal and I wait. Well, right to my left, when I'm doing that, is a double bike lane, and it's both ways. Can I make a left? Anybody know if I can make a left? I don't even know if I can make a left, right? I literally don't, and I've tried to look, right? And here's my point. I'm 66 years old. I got my driver's license and my driver's training when I was 15 and a half. No one has given me any training since then. No one has told me what laws have changed. No one has updated me at all. So we give you your license and say, have a nice life. If you get to be 80 or 90, maybe we'll try to test your proficiency once more, but otherwise you're good to go. And we change all this stuff and we don't teach anybody. And then we're not enforcing either, by the way. So what do you expect? The other day, and I'll be quiet, I was involved in a ribbon cutting for a safety project. It was on the railroad. It was a great project, if you will, and I'm glad we did it. But what it did, when you come to a railroad crossing, particularly in a rural area, and you got the bar across you, and then going the other direction, on the other side of the train tracks, you got a bar like that, and the lights flash and the bells ring, and you stop. Guess what we did? We put up another bar over here and another bar over there, so you couldn't drive around the bars. Come on. And we'll spend millions of dollars doing that because somebody decides to drive around the bars. What do you do with that? I mean, where does it end? Right? I want to educate and enforce and stop spending money to save people from themselves on engineering and hard cost stuff. We've got to educate and enforce. And the education is the key because people don't know the rules. They don't. And we don't do anything to tell them. And I don't think it's any different in D.C. or Maryland or anywhere else in the country. And we've got to start doing that somehow or another.
Interim Director Kershbaum, I'll let you have the final word.
Thanks, Leslie. I don't think I need to underscore more on the safety piece. I do want to say one thing that we're looking at that runs a little counter to the theme of great complete streets is really now looking at complete networks. That we can't make every street be all things to all people, and we just really kind
Hear,
of get
hear.
bogged down on the weight of it.
Here, here.
So early on, we wanted to expand the bike network, and we were, every opportunity we had, it's a road diet, put in a bike lane. And we did have a fantastic proliferation of our bike network, but what we need to do is do fewer and make them better.
Yep.
Because I think our first speaker was showing the range of how comfortable people feel with bike lanes, and just throwing up paint and flex posts does not make it safe.
No, it does not.
So going all in when we're doing a bike lane with concrete and making them hard and safe. And that means that we're not going to do one on every street. And we're going to go all in on bus lanes and make some streets where we are going to have rapid, efficient buses. And then we're going to have others where people are going to be able to drive and use those really for commuters in. So that's just one piece of kind of think how we've been evolving our thinking.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for being here today to have some really frank conversation about the transportation opportunities and challenges ahead. So Interim Director Kershbaum, Secretary Miller, Secretary Wiedefeld, thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. Can we give them a round of applause?
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie.
And I will turn this back over to Jack McDougall.
Well, thank you everybody for coming today. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for participating. I thought it was very frank and candid conversation. Which is great. Randy, thank you for starting with. Yep.
There we are.
Solve these challenges, and there's a lot of. Thank you, and happy holidays, and everyone have a good day. Yeah, be safe. Yes.